coordination. As I mentioned, 98% of the generation in Albania was on that river. And you have your little project at the very bottom of that river on the downstream. So what we needed to have in order to make the private investor comfortable was some sort of a cascade coordination agreement to make sure that not too much or not too little water is released by the off-taker upstream, because that would have not only impacted the economics of the project, but that could have caused an environmental disaster, like floods and so on and so forth. In the end, to make a long story short, imagine a situation with no PPPs before our intervention. This was the first pilot PPP project to be implemented under this new PPP legislation. When we launched the pre-qualification, 12 top-notch investors turned up because they read the law, they felt confident about the structure, they saw, oh, they are going about it the right way, we want to do it. So we received pre-qualification applications from 12 leading utilities in Europe. There was a bidders conference that we organized together with the government. We discussed some of the key issues. Later on, we made some changes after we had received feedback from investors to the bidding documents. At the end of the day, in June 2008, we received 2 bids, one from Verbund of Austria and another one from a consortium of Electrabel and Compagnie Nationale du Rhône of France. Shortly thereafter, we announced Verbund as the winning bidder. Well, not shortly, actually, 1 month later. And the transaction actually closed roughly 3 months later. Verbund was the winning bidder. The government of Albania, they took the resulting tender documents and contracts and replicated the same structure on some other projects, right? So there's at least 2 other projects that have been structured and implemented by the government itself using pretty much the same structure, right? Some of the key impact indicators, the way we had planned them in the beginning, and the ultimate result in terms of investment mobilized and fiscal impact to the government. Some of the key project design features. What makes this project a little bit specific and unique and also expensive is the fact that Verbund used a very innovative technology in this case. Usually, when you look at a typical hydropower project with a dam, a significant portion of the overall capex are the civil works. Right? You need to do a lot of construction, and the powerhouse and the turbines are a relatively minor element of all that. Verbund came with an innovative approach. They said, look, we can reduce the amount of civil works, and we can install what's called straflomatrix or hydromatrix technology. Very simply described, imagine a rope with fans installed and tied to that rope, and you then put them in the water. You have some relatively limited civil structures. If you need to service or replace one of the turbines, you lift it up, you do the servicing, and then you put it back in. The result is that you can develop a project much faster, and there's a reduction of civil works and then a resulting reduction of potential environmental impact, right? This was the first commercially, this was the first project that entered commercial operation with this technology. Before that, they had only tested the technology somewhere in Canada. And the technology was expensive. That's why if you look at the cost per megawatt of installed capacity, the project is relatively expensive. But if you look at the tariff under the PPA, the tariff is very favorable. It's 5.9 euro cents per kilowatt hour. That was the offer at the time when Albania was importing power at 11 euro cents per kilowatt hour. So was it a good deal for the government? It was a very good deal for the government back then. Lessons learned from this project. Proper risk allocation matrix is of utmost importance. You need to sit, the government needs to sit with its advisors, discuss what the key risks are, and try to allocate them properly. Gone are the days when the government could do this. I mean, okay, look, let's just launch the tender, see what happens. Maybe people will like it. And if they don't, well, then we'll think about it. I mean, this you could do in 2007 and 2008, right? When there was a lot of competition, too many investors. These days, investors are extremely cautious, extremely picky. They go for good projects. If you start with something that makes little sense, I mean, people, they will not even buy tickets, they will not even engage technical advisors because they see that this is nonsense. I mean, it's not worth spending my time and money on something like that. So it's important to start with something that's reasonable. Then later on you can make some adjustments, but you need to be reasonable right from the start. Again, some clients, and I have to admit that it happens in probably 70% of the cases. When we tell them this in the beginning, they say, don't worry, you're too cautious, you know, you're very conservative, we need to shift those risks, I mean, we're not ready to take them. Then there's a bidder conference and you have an army of potential private investors that tell them the same thing. And then they say, oh, okay, well, probably those IFC guys were right and we should rethink it, right? Happens in 70% of the cases. It's extremely difficult to pre-negotiate a perfect contract that would fit all possible scenarios. In many countries, and also it's a culture also in our institution, right? There is this thinking that, okay, we have tender documents, right? We receive bids, and the only thing that can happen after that is a signature. No further negotiation, no further adjustment. We need to have 99% finalized documents when we received bids. In hydropower, it's not possible. These guys offered a technical solution that nobody had ever seen before. It took our technical consultants 1 month to figure out whether the whole thing could work. They had to travel to Canada, look at the generators, figure out whether or not it works, and then we had to make some adjustments in the project documents. What is important to do in those cases is to have tender documents that are fair and transparent. You need to define the box. This is what you have to comply with, and this is the flexibility that we are giving you. I don't necessarily need a Siemens bulb. If it comes from, I don't know, Samsung, it's okay, as long as it can do the same job, right? Sometimes when you look at the documents, they tell you that I want this mouse with this color and with this button, while any other mouse can do the same job. Getting the key stakeholders to agree on items relevant to them during the tender process, not after. Again, you have to have a sustainable structure before you receive bids, because then the risk is that you're going to receive conditional proposals, and then it becomes a nightmare, and it's very politically sensitive to award a project to a proposal that's qualified, that's not necessarily in line with the tender rules, and so on and so forth. And the last but not least, the efforts that we dedicated to the improvement of the legislation, drafting of the new PPP law played a critical role in the success of this transaction. Without the new piece of legislation, we wouldn't have had so many investors in this project. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. As I said, I'd be happy to share the presentation with you and discuss anything that might be of interest to you and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I request Mr. David Pelches to give his presentation, Rethinking Energy.
And I have another good news for you. I will almost not speak about PPP, but I will start with, of course, because it's conference on the PPP. And talking about PPP from my perspective, which is, by the way, again, P, is private. So I'm looking from the private side. And why would the private side be interested in the PPP? And Jan said that we need PPPs. So who needs? Who are we? Is this private? Is this public? So speaking from the private side or listening to presentations this morning, I understood something like this, that in many projects, private is using public to make profit. So this is another definition of PPP. But let us see if this is true. So why public needs private? Everybody was speaking about money, but I'm not a banker and I have no idea about the things, but in principle, governments are not that difficult to borrow money. So are the governments really looking for money? Is the public really looking for money? I don't believe so. It's looking for the know-how. It's looking for the project management. It's looking for the expertise. And how they force us to do this by getting us in the same boat. Because they lack some knowledge, they lack self-confidence, and they get the private in the same boat and then say, okay, look, private part, if you want to make money, you have to help us make money too. It's a good way. But I stop with this reasoning at this moment and go to one of the things that I believe it's very important for public-private. It has to be partnership, which means the private part should not only be involved or given the chance, if you wish, in the financing part or in the execution part. Martin was telling we need to have clear tender or whatever, clear spec. Yes, but we want to participate in creating the spec too. Because why private needs public? For two reasons. One, we want to have some premium profit. Yes. Second, we want to have some opportunity. Because some big problems are offering big opportunities. And this can only be done in cooperation with the public. So energy is one of these problems. We started as a private sector, we are starting rethinking some things in the past. One of my presentations that somebody in this audience already heard was rethinking cities. Then we were rethinking transportation. Then somebody said that he's rethinking healthcare. And one of the things that have to be retaught, and we are rethinking right now, is energy. So why? Why would we rethink energy? Is this an art? By the way, does anybody know this picture? Yes, Kanagawa big wave, which was something like this. So do we really have to rethink energy? Or do you think about nightmare? I think India seen this nightmare in energy about a year and a half ago when you had a major blackout. In about 300 million people had a blackout, if you remember. Do we have to think about energy? Is this a solution? You were building hydropower plant. We have coal power plants, we have nuclear power plants, we have big transmission lines. Is this a solution? Partially, yes, absolutely. But it can also be a problem. How you can do it in Philippines? You have thousands of islands. You build where? You built a nuclear power plant here and then a big pipeline to here, and here you have 22 houses. So, do you don't agree? So, in principle, even with energy, we have to rethink a little bit. We have brutal data, and people were telling you this data, I will skip this. So we have to think. Okay? Start thinking. Do you think? Who is thinking? Hands up. Others, what are doing? Okay, good. Is the energy really our problem? You said you're thinking. Is the energy our real problem?
Energy is to be captured. Energy is available. How to capture is the problem.
Very good.
Renewable energy is available.
That's. You wanted to have a comment? Yes. Yes, you're right. And look, if I tell you that energy, the quantity of energy in our planet is increasing all the time. Look at the climate changes. The average temperature is rising, so the energy stored in our environment is higher. So we have enough energy. So energy is not our major problem. But what is our major problem? The problem to solve is at the right place, at the right time, the right amount of energy. So to do this, right form, you're absolutely right. But yeah, so we have to look for the inspiration, and we always get the inspiration for the same things. Whenever the humankind, the human race went to find the inspiration, they went back to the nature. And nature is offering us some solutions. But we are in India. I had to involve him. Do big problems really need big solutions? I believe that big problems need great solutions, but not necessarily big solutions. Do we always trade quality for quantity? We prefer that part or that part? Or what is big against the smart? Who is winning? So how we approach the problems? The solution to most of the problems is always the same. And they are very simple principles, you know, from the eagle fly to the Su-27 and to the internet. Very different fields, but the same principles. Having same basic building blocks, distributed intelligence, defined communication protocols and language. We have to follow the common big goal. We have to embed the sustainability, and we have to stabilize the system. So, when we come back to the energy, we have to solve these problems. Simple. We have to produce, transmit, and consume. So for production, it's very simple. You said sustainable. I agree. So, and the other gentleman said it's the form is important. So we never produce energy. We are just transforming energy to be right in technical viewpoint. But let's say that we produce something. Transmission or transport, we have to avoid it. Because transmission or transport means losses. Losses means pollution. Pollution and losses means reduction of profit, if we are back to the private. Consumption. So at the other side, the best energy is saved energy. Reduce pollution and again. But what we can do? We can reduce, we can manage, and we can store. So now, to go to that solution, and we will need the